preacher, y'all, so bear with me. But Carl and I got married in '07, and well, you know what? He gives me a hard time, and I'm gonna tell you in a minute why I don't remember certain things. But we both had a pretty tumultuous life. I'm gonna skip forward to this event real quick, but I'm gonna give you the Cliff Notes version of my life. Carl can give you the Cliff Notes version of his real quick, and we'll tell you how they came together. But I was born under an alias. The man that married my mother was married to 3 other women. He also had many other children, many warrants, wanted by the police, and he used to be a pastor until he scammed his church out of a bunch of money and slept with one of the youth. So that was my father. My biological father, I'm sorry, he's not my father. And he ain't my daddy either, so. So that was all before I was 5 years old. And then when I was on my last day of kindergarten, I started kindergarten when I was 4. I had turned 5 in December. And in, I guess it would be May, he came to pick me up on the last day of school, and my aunt was going to take me shopping. And that was the last time I ever saw my biological father. And then my mom found this new guy, married him, and he was absolutely wonderful. He had 4 kids who were almost grown. His youngest was 13, and he adopted my brother and I. We were 3 and 5. And he became the father that God replaced what was stolen from me, basically. He was good to me even back then. And he gave me a father who showed me love, and who showed me what a good father looks like, what he provides, and he was very good to us. And so even though I had a good father then, I didn't realize that last day when I was 5 years old, that little girl, that seed planted. And the devil will do that. He'll use whatever he can. Yeah. So he planted that seed, and it started to sprout when I turned about 16. And all of a sudden I felt like I needed a man's attention, and I needed a man's love. And I started dating a guy. This whole time I'm going to church with my grandmother. She drugged you whether you wanted to or not, and you got a whooping if you didn't want to go. That's just the way it was. Right? Pot of water, whatever was close by, her shoe. Whatever. She was, you're going to church. And because she knew that if you train up a child in the way that they should go, when they're older, they will not depart from it. And I don't care how many times I sat in that pizza party and I sat in that youth group, that's not what I remember from youth group. What I remember was sitting in worship and watching my grandmama with her hands, those arthritic hands, and they would straighten out when she would worship, and she would sing, and tears would stream down her face, and I was like, why is she crying? She was happy 2 seconds ago. You know, like it was just, I didn't get it. And, but she knew one day I would. And I thank her for that so much, because when I got pregnant when I was 17 years old with my oldest daughter. And the church basically said, you're not welcome here, you're a bad influence on the rest of the youth group. So I said, you know what, I'm done with you, and I'm done with God. And I went and lived for hell for the next 18 years. And around my 31st birthday, I'm doing what I did. I was singing professionally for a living. I was making pretty good money doing it. But I was also had completely become an alcoholic. I would do any drug you put in front of me. Happy to do it. Thank you very much. I was just running from not 1, but 2 failed marriages by the time I was 23. I said, I'm never getting married again, God. Don't want to get married. I was in a long-term relationship for 7 years with a good guy, but he didn't want to marry me. And so I left. took my girls, and they got to see me live like an absolute heathen. Passed out drunk in front of them. Left them when I probably shouldn't have left them. For longer than I probably shouldn't have left them. But my judgment was because of substances. I couldn't make, normal decisions a good mother would make. And so I'm playing in this band. We're touring up and down the kind of the Northeast, and they hired this guy to play guitar. And he was really quiet. And actually, he ran Carl has his degree in audio engineering, so he actually was our sound man before he was our guitar player. And I'd see him, and he would always pull his hat down. He had a beard like down to here. He looked like he belonged on Duck Dynasty. He had a beard like down to here. His hair was down to here, and he wore a beanie all the time. He was like Jace Robertson. And he would just walk around, plugging things in, standing back there, bored, like Justin.
The truth behind that is that I was actually so high all the time that I couldn't do anything. That's not an exaggeration. I'm not saying that to glorify it, but it's absolutely
not at all.
True.
He absolutely was. And I thought, man, he's weird. He's cute, but he's weird. And our drummer was like, no, he's not weird. I was like, what's his deal? He's a pothead. I'm like, sorry. But Carl struggled with that for 10 years, all day, every day, 10 years straight, never missed a day. And if you know anybody like that, you know how it affects your mind after so long, so many years. And I'll let Carl give that piece of his testimony. But so yeah, we finally started talking, dated for about 3 weeks, and decided we're getting married. And we got married 4.5 months later. And by year 1 end, we were ready for a divorce. He hated me. I couldn't stand him. Love you. And so we said, all right, one last ditch effort. I auditioned for a show called Nashville Star that was going to be on NBC. It had been on TNN TBS for a long time, and it was moving to NBC, and I was going to be on this show. So I went and auditioned, did the first round, got through, got the second round, got through Pittsburgh, then DC, and then they were like, all right, if you make it to the top 40, we'll call you in 2 days and you have to fly to Nashville. They called me 2 days later, said, yep, fly to Nashville. I got on a plane. I didn't have a phone. I was completely sequestered for 5 days. He had my girls. He was back home, and at this time we lived in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And, Factoryville, technically, sorry. Nobody knows where that is. So at this time, after about the third day of ordering room service, you couldn't leave your room. You couldn't do anything, no contact with the outside world. So during this time, about the third day, I got tired of practicing my songs, and it's like, I'm gonna go crazy 2 more days. So I looked in the nightstand, there was a Gideon's Bible. And I got it out, and I started reading. And I said, well, it still doesn't make sense. But God kept working.
Yes.
And kept working, and all of a sudden I would be sitting there, and I would remember something I read. And I was like, and he would give me a revelation about it, and I'm like, okay, that's weird. But little did I know, back home, Carl was going out of his mind. He had 2 girls. He didn't know what to do with. He's never been a father before. He's trying to handle everything. We were living with his grandmother who had dementia. And he finally came to the end of his rope, went down the basement, dug through a box and found his Bible.
Come on.
And started reading it. So here we are, 900 miles apart or whatever it is. And God's doing the same thing to both of us. So we both weren't sold completely on it. So I came back. I was on the first show. I came back. I didn't make it to the top 10, so I got cut in the first round and came home. And Carl we had a friend, he said, hey, I've got you a job with Gibson Guitar in Nashville. And I said, I had emails saying, hey, if you come to Nashville, I've got this, and this lined up for you. Because now that you've been on TV, we can, use that and we can play off that, and here we go. So we're like, okay. So we pack up the car. And the plan was to get to North Carolina. I was going to stay with my mom and dad, and he was going to go on to Nashville, start work for a couple of weeks, save a place, and we were going to move there. The economy crashed. Gibson put a hiring freeze on. That's when you couldn't find gas, nothing. It was 2009, Ricky? 2008, yeah. And couldn't find gas, couldn't find nothing. Gibson says, sorry, man. I know you moved, but we can't hire anybody. So we're like, we are stuck in the middle of nowhere. No house, no jobs, no car, nothing. And we were pretty hopeless at that point. And my mom and dad were like, y'all come to church with us? And we're like, yeah, it's okay. They kept on. And I'm telling you guys, once God has his hand over you, I walked into the church and the tears just started. Like, I knew God was calling me back. I knew it. We both knew it. We both knew he was calling us back. So fast forward a few years, we're in ministry now. We've got a band, and we're starting to get some momentum, and we're moving forward. And one day, it was my son Elijah that's around here playing somewhere. It was on right before his birthday. His birthday was on a Sunday, and on Monday, I had the flu. And on Monday, I woke up and I started passing out. And Elijah was only a year old, not even a year old, because we just had his birthday party. And so I called Carl and I said, you're gonna have to come home, I'm passing out, I don't know why. So he came home. He can tell you how he found me. It was pretty bad.
She was just laid out on the couch, unconscious, and Elijah was one, and he was just had trashed the house. I mean, there by himself, screaming, crying, terrified. We were pretty scared. We called the ambulance.
You took me into the first hospital.
Took you to the hospital, yeah.
Yeah, it took me. Carl took me to our local hospital, got me in the van. But the first miracle is that nothing happened to my son while I was passed out. I mean, because babies, they get into everything. And I don't know how long, we don't know how long they were out. It could have been 2 minutes, it could have been an hour and a half, I don't know. So I get to the hospital, my blood pressure was like 68/32. And they was like, he heard my lungs and he's like, we need an x-ray, but I'm almost positive you have pneumonia. So they took an x-ray. My entire right lobe was full. My left was about half full. He's like, you need to be in the ICU. We've called an ambulance, because they didn't have an ICU at the hospital I went to. It was just a little tiny town in Bryson City, little tiny hospital. And they said, now, like right now. So I get to the hospital, which is in Silva, which is about 35 minutes away. I get there, and the last thing I remember is I used to work for a pediatrician, and she was standing at the double door. She's the pediatrician on call at the hospital, and she's standing at the double doors, and she's like, what am I going to do with you? I was like, I don't know. I didn't mean to get this sick. And that's the last thing I remember. And the rest is kind of what they told me. I can tell you what I went through, but I'll let Carl kind of explain the rest quickly, and we'll try to get back on track. So
that was on Monday, and so that pediatrician that she mentioned, she called me that night and said, you need to get your wife out of this hospital. If you don't get her out of this hospital, she's going to be dead. So I let it go another day, and the doctors were saying they were doing tests, but they couldn't find anything wrong. They had no idea what was going on with her. So Wednesday hits, and I decided on Wednesday, I said, if they don't give me an answer by today, then I'm going in there, or no, that was Tuesday night. I said, I'm going in there Wednesday morning at 7 o'clock, and I'm pulling her out. We're going to the other hospital.
That was my son's first birthday. It was February 16th, 2011.
And little did I know, that night, Tuesday night at 4 o'clock in the morning, she stopped breathing totally. And they never called me or anything. I got there at 7 o'clock thinking I'm going to have to fight a doctor. And they said, oh, the helicopter's already here. We're airlifting her to Asheville, which is about an hour away from us.
What they didn't tell him was that I had gone into congestive heart failure, and I coded, and I died. And they said I was gone for about 8 minutes. They had trouble intubating me, and they said I was a difficult intubation. We still don't know what that means. I don't know if it was the swelling, the inflammation from being sick, and we don't know. But for some reason, they couldn't get me on a ventilator or to bag me for about 8 minutes. So they put me on the helicopter and sent me.
They sent her to Mission. Almost immediately, the doctors at Mission Hospital started telling me, you may want to start making arrangements. You may want to start planning for the worst. And so I didn't start making arrangements, but I started making phone calls. And one of the craziest things that happened was my brother, who lives in Montana, he was pretty certain, he's a paramedic, and he was fairly certain they were going to pronounce her dead at any moment. So he flew in. He wanted to be with me when that moment happened. And so we get there, and she's in a coma. She was altogether in a coma for 3 weeks, 2 weeks, a little over, that's right, a little over 2 weeks. She was in a coma in the neurotrauma ICU. So it was a lot of us just sitting around doing nothing. And my brother, being a paramedic, he wanted to go see the helicopter. He wanted to see what kind of helicopters we have in North Carolina.
Same as they do in Montana, I'm sure.
So we found the helicopter pilot. And I started to explain to her, I said, yeah, y'all flew my wife in here about 4 days ago from Silva. She was a really severe pneumonia patient. And she took her hat off and she said, I'm so sorry about your loss. And I said, no, she's not dead. And she said, well, she was dead when she was on my helicopter.
Oh, jeez.
And wow. I'll never forget that as long as I live. And
thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Yes.
It didn't get better fast. It took, like we said, 2 weeks. And all this time, the doctors really gave us no hope. They really had the worst prognosis they could give us. But we had people praying everywhere. We had support. But here's the thing, and if you get nothing else out of this, religion doesn't save you from anybody.
Come on.
It doesn't save you from your sin. It doesn't save you. The only one that can save you is Jesus.
Yeah.
Because when we got saved, we made the fatal mistake of giving our hearts to our church instead of giving our hearts to Jesus.
Come on. That's it.
Because we found out later on that while she was laid up dying in the hospital, our church was having meetings trying to figure out what sin was in our life that caused this to happen.
Wow.
Now there was some really amazing people that we still call family to this day that were at the hospital with us the whole time.
Prayed, cooked,
supported us. I was out of work for a month. But there was those few, not everybody you go to church with has your best interest in mind.
That's it.
So it taught us a serious lesson about being near to the Father, being near the intimacy, like Phil was talking about in the wilderness, that intimacy with Jesus. That's where our strength comes from. That's the joy of the Lord that is our strength, is being close to Him. We put everything we had into a religious system that as soon as we were injured, they put us before a firing squad and killed us. And it took a long time to recover from that.
Yeah, it almost seems like Jezebel just wants to put you out of your misery.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the way it is. They don't want to see you healed or restored. They want to see you just put out of your misery.
Go ahead.
So, I mean,
it's the saddest thing about
it really is.
About where the Bride of Christ is in today's day is that we're the only organization that actively shoots our wounded.
Come on, man.
The military doesn't do that. They don't leave a man behind, but the church, they'll shoot their wounded because they slow them down. They make them look bad.
That's right.
Wow.
Joshua Fontaine said today on Facebook, he said, you watch with this Ashley Madison thing, so many people are going to be so quick to just get rid of pastor. They're not going to want to see him restored or Anybody can fall.
good.
Y'all know, I mean,
Come on.
I have.
Yes.
I mean, your pastor is no different. That's why we need to be praying for our pastors and praying for our preachers and praying for our teachers. I mean, they need it too. They carry a heavy burden, y'all. And I'm not saying that makes it okay. It doesn't. It doesn't make it okay. Secret sin will always be exposed. It just will. It always will. Mine have been. I mean, it always will. So, but I mean, y'all be praying for these men. I just want to throw that in there. But go ahead.
So she, eventually they were able to get her out of the coma. They were able to get her off the respirator, sent her home. That's the best part of the whole story. I gotta tell that. So she came home. When she came out of because she was in the coma for so long that she didn't know what was going on. She didn't really know who she was. Well, she knew who she was. She barely knew who I was.
They kept doing MRIs because I kept failing the neurological test with the questions and everything, and they kept doing MRIs because they said usually when something like that happens, you have brain injury. You're without it. The University of Michigan says after 10 minutes, the brain is not likely to recover at all without oxygen. And I was without it for 8. So I was actually doing pretty good, just thinking George Bush was still the president or whatever I was saying. So, I mean...
The best way I can describe it, if anybody's ever had a family member who has had Alzheimer's or dementia, I was the primary caretaker for my grandpa and my grandma when they had it. And Bethany was exactly like that. For a little while. So we came home. She got another infection in her lungs and ended up back in the hospital. Is that right?
Well, what they think is that it was MRSA.
Yeah.
Because I went back in the hospital like 3 days later with pain so bad in my chest I couldn't breathe again. I was like, oh, here we go. Well, I got there and he's like, honey, your chest, they did an MRI with contrast and they said your lungs look like Swiss cheese. Something has eaten holes. The biggest one was about 4 centimeters. So yeah, it was, he's like, I don't understand like how you're still here. So they were like, let's get you back in the hospital. That was 3 days later because the pain never had gone away in my chest. So,
but
my mom's a nurse, so she knew something was still going on. So
it's my favorite part. I got to tell this. This is the best part of the whole story. You know God's a healer, right?
Yeah.
So the doctor said, the whole time that she was in this cloudy mental state, I would ask her, I would say, Bethany, do you know why you're in the hospital? Baby, do you know what's going on? And she would look at me with this blank stare and say, I was in a car accident. Because the devil had her convinced that she was in a car accident, that I had left her for another woman, that Elijah was dead in the car accident, and that her girls were lost. She was convinced. I mean...
So let me tell
crazy.
what happened while I was out, so that before you
Okay.
tell that. So, okay, I told you guys the last thing I remember was those double doors. Okay, so I swell up, 3 days, congestive heart failure, died on my son's first birthday. When I died, y'all, I remember those doors opening, and I closed my eyes because I was getting tired. And all I saw was light. Just light upon light upon light. And all of a sudden, this peace came over me. And I was like, oh my gosh, that feels better. Whew. Oh, because I was having trouble breathing before, and it was just, I was tired. I felt good again. And it was just light and more light and more light. And I'm like, okay, all right. And then suddenly light came into focus. And I looked, and there was this huge gate. And as a kid, when somebody tells you about the pearly gates, you think of, I don't know, I thought of pearls. Do you know what I mean? Like a string of pearls. But this looked like it was underwater. Like mother of pearl with every color you could think of. And the sound of water. And I remembered there's a river flowing from the throne. Because I was thinking, what is that water? Where is it? I don't see it. And in heaven, you don't talk. Because your spirit bears witness, so you know what everybody's saying. And that's how he talks to you, just like he talks to you here, but there it's just so much louder. And he doesn't speak to you, he speaks into you.
Wow.
And it's like warm water. And there's nothing but peace. I knew my baby was still on earth. I knew my husband was still on earth. But because you don't want for nothing in heaven, it didn't matter. And I said, for a second, I was like, you know, you have that moment. I had that moment of awareness, and God said, they'll be here in a minute. Because there is no time in heaven.
Come on.
They don't know you're gone. They don't know they're gone. I mean, they know they're gone, but they know you're coming. He said, they'll be right here. And I didn't see people. I saw a few people I knew who had passed on. But the rest of them, I knew they were there with the knowledge of Jesus Christ. Because like I said, he speaks into you. And people were walking and smiling, and I knew what they were saying, and they were praising the Lord. And I could hear angels singing. But it wasn't like one group of angels singing. It was about 100, and they were all singing a different song. But it all came into one song.
Yes.
And it was loud, and it was beautiful. And the only thing I know to tell you guys, I've watched people I love suffer. At the end, I didn't feel a thing. Carl can tell you what I went through. That was my body. God took me out of my body long before I died. I don't know how it happened. I just know I didn't feel a thing. I don't remember dying. I just remember 1 second I was here, and the next I was in the presence of God.
Wow.
And so I decide, I'm standing there, and I'm like, well, I want to go in there. So I start walking, and there's people walking in there, and the gate's open, and I walk in, and I'm like looking around, and then all of a sudden, I was like, I knew where I had to go. Like I was trying to get to Jesus. And it was like it was like I had a cord around my waist and somebody snatched me back. And all of a sudden, I couldn't breathe again. And I woke up, and I was in the hospital on a ventilator. And I started pulling out tubes. I'm ready to get out. Scared to death. So these alarms start going off. And somebody comes in, they're like, no, baby, you can't do that, you can't do that. And they putting it back in and fixing my IVs and everything. And I remember looking up at my IV, and it was like this tower. And I have a picture on my phone, it's on our Facebook page too. But it looks like, I mean, I've never seen that many different machines and bags and everything else. And I look up at it, and I was like, oh my God, I'm not dead. So then all of a sudden fear gripped me. And I was like, I want to go back, I want to go back, I want to go back. God, don't, no, I want to go back where I was. I want to go, and I am mad. And I was like, I want to go back wherever you had me. And I felt this feeling, like he said, I can't right now. And I knew it was not my time to die. And so I just felt it. And I was like, oh, I can't lay here like this. And I'm thinking that to myself, and a nurse comes over and she injects something into my IV, and it puts me back in the coma. I went back to sleep. And the next thing I knew, it's pitch black. And I heard a voice. And he said, who do you think you are working for God? And I was so scared. I I don't think I've ever been that scared in my life. His voice, the sound of his voice was just like nails on a chalkboard. I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. It was beautiful. Because how many of you know sometimes the devil's lies sound real good? It was beautiful, but it grated against the Holy Spirit. And we are the temple.
Right.
And it grated against something inside me, and I knew it was the Holy Spirit. And I'm like, that ain't the voice of God. Because I just heard the voice of God not that long ago, and I know what that sounds like. So I was like, you gotta be kidding me. I came from that to this, now I'm back, and that's what I gotta deal with. And every time, what he would do, it was like I was in a movie theater, except he had me pushed up against a screen, so I had to look at it up close. And he's like, you've done this, you've done this, you've done this, you've done this, you've done this. Still think you can work for God? Well, you've done this, you've done this, you've done this, you've done this. And he showed me everything. Every time I lied to somebody I loved. Every time I hurt somebody, even when I didn't mean to.
Wow.
And then he showed me the big things too. But it was those little things. Because I remembered the big things. But it's those little things that you let slip through. And it's hard to see all that unrighteousness at once. I got news for you. I don't want to stand on Judgment Day and have to see that again. I want to see the blood.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm telling you, you don't want to see that. So he kept on, and he goes, now, I'm going to show you where you belong. And I was like, because I had closed my eyes, I had seen, I was like, I don't want to see anymore, I don't want to see anymore. He goes, fine, then I'm going to show you where you belong. So I opened my eyes and I looked around. And it was like, the only way I just can describe it is like a nuclear holocaust. Like it was just nothing. Rubble. It was like a city, but there was nothing left of it but ruins. And I came up on what looked like a cathedral, but it was burnt out. I mean, it was burnt, it was black, it was gray, it was falling apart. And so I looked down and there were spiral stairs, so I started walking. And I walked, went down, down, down. And I looked, and everywhere I stepped, there were cracks in the ground, and I could see the brimstone, and I could smell it. I couldn't feel it. And I know God, some people have said I've heard stories of people who have gone to hell, and they can literally feel, they say they feel like they're being suffocated, like the air, there's no air, and they can't breathe, but it's just the torture of that. And I didn't feel any of that. I felt, everything I felt was like almost internal. So I'm walking and I'm looking and I see the fire, and I look out a little further and I can see that it opens up. And it's just fire. It's just red. It's like orange. It's just like brimstone. So I'm going down, but I keep going down and I'm not getting to the brimstone. I don't know what it is. So he takes me down. He's like, I'm gonna show you something. And I get into a long hallway, and it's underground. And it looks like caves that have been not cut out, but like just have formed, and there are cells. And there was every manner of demon you could think of. And they just paced, looking through you, into you. And you could hear what they wanted to do to you. And I can't even repeat it. But it was like they knew your nightmares. They knew what scared you. They knew everything. And I knew if they got a hold of me, they would rip me apart. And it was the most terrifying thing I think I've ever seen. The feeling was so far beyond any horror movie, so far beyond any I grew up in Lakeland, Florida, and Orlando has Halloween Horror Nights, and we used to go to Terror on Church Street down there, and those are professionals, and it was still nothing compared to that. And it kept going and kept going and kept going. And finally, I was like, I can't. I sat down, and I covered my ears, and I covered my head. And I opened my eyes again. I was sitting back at the top of those stairs. And the devil came up behind me, and he started whispering, "This is where you belong." And for a second, I thought, God, is this where I belong? And every time they would wake me up and try to wean me off that ventilator and come back and put me to sleep again, it would start all over again. That nightmare went on for 14 days. Day after day after day of literal hell. Day after day, day after day, day after day. And finally, the last day, I had gotten to the point, and I saw them coming. Carl can tell you, they came in one day, and I was like, I would shake my head. I shook my head at my mom one day, and I was like, please, I couldn't talk, but I was like, please don't let them put me back to sleep. Please don't. I was just like screaming. I was like in my head, because I couldn't talk. I'm like, oh my God, please don't let them put me back to sleep. And I would see her go over to that bag, or to my line, and every time she would put it in there, I knew what was going to happen. And I was just like, finally, I opened my eyes, and I'm on the top of that staircase again, and I just started sobbing. And the devil just started circling me. He's like, give up. You're paralyzed. I couldn't move when I woke up, so I thought I was. Your husband left you. Why? Because you're paralyzed. You can't be a wife. How are you going to satisfy your husband?
Wow.
He's left you. Your baby died in that car accident. You have nothing left. Your daughters aren't saved anymore. What are you going to do? He goes, give up. And I was like, no. And he said, give up. I said, no. And I started crying. He's like, give up. He goes, you have nothing. You are nothing. Give up. And I screamed, Jesus.
Yes.
And when I screamed Jesus, I felt the arms of God come up over me and pull me back into the light. And when I woke up, I saw my husband and my mother and my dad walk through those doors. He's there waiting. He's just waiting on people to cry out for him. You're his kids. If one of our kids went and took off into the middle of that street, don't you think the father would go running after them and snatch them back out of the street? If he called for me, don't you think we would run over there, attack whatever had our kid? That's the way God feels about you.
Yeah.
He is so desperately in love with you. And it never gets easier to tell this story. Because the desperation, I don't think. The only other way to describe it is the torture of seeing your kids or somebody you love and you know they're dying, whether it's spiritually or physically. I don't think there's any worse torture than having to watch that. But to know that when I cried out to Jesus, I didn't even get the last part of his name out before he had his arms around me, and it was like he just picked me up. And then I heard his voice, audibly. He said, I'm here. And all I could think of was Mary. She's at the tomb, and Jesus is gone. She doesn't know where he is. And he says, Mary. She says, doesn't recognize him. She said, Lord? He said, I'm here. And she recognized him when he said, I'm here. And he said, I did not bring this upon you, but I want to bring you through it for your testimony and for my glory.
Yes. Jesus.
This generation is not afraid of hell anymore.
Come on.
I wasn't afraid of hell anymore. I thought it was a fairy tale.
Preach. Come on.
God was and the devil were unicorns, things made up to control us by the Illuminati. I mean, I just thought that everything was a big game, was a big story. But if you knew how real it was, God said, you tell them there's a hell. Because it is not my will that any one of them should wind up there. Hell was not made for you. It was made for the devil and a third of the angels. You don't belong there. You belong in the home that your Father created for you. That is not the place for us. And scaring you into hell isn't going to do any good. Because you know why? It may keep you straight for a little while, but it's only the love of God that's going to keep you in the place of repentance.
That's it.
You know, in the world, you don't do something for somebody unless you care about them. You don't do something for somebody unless you love them. Until God puts the love of Christ in you. And then you do something. You do those things just because He is love. And you become the righteousness of God in Christ Jesus. But He loved you so much that He sent His Son to live absolutely perfect, to do what we couldn't do. We can't live perfect, but Christ did that perfectly, and He died the death that we deserved.
That's it. Yes.
He suffered for our illnesses, for our mind, for our healing. And then He died so that we could die to sin and be resurrected again in Christ. So that when we do see God on that judgment day, He doesn't see stains of our sin. All He sees is the blood of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, His Son.
Yes.
Hell is real. And like I said, you can't be... It breaks my heart to know people are going to wind up there. That's why we do what we do. That's why all of us do what we do. No one wants to see you somewhere you don't belong. They want to see you seated at a wedding feast.
Yes.
With your Father. And some of you don't know what a good father looks like, and I didn't for a very long time. Because even earthly fathers have flaws. But He is the perfect Father.
Yes.
And I struggled for a long time, even after that, because I didn't understand why He saved me. I still felt unworthy to do His work. I still felt unworthy to sing praises to Him. I still felt unworthy to tell people about Him. And then one day, I got the revelation of who I am.
Yes. Yes, Lord.
He's my father, and I'm his daughter.
Yes.
And there is nothing he won't do for me.
Yes.
And you are his daughter, and you are his son, and there is nothing he won't do for you. The Bible says he came to seek and to save that which is lost. He's not just there waiting on you. He is, but he's not just there waiting on you when you decide it's time to come back to him. He is pursuing you, and that's why you can live your life without him.
Wow.
But you'll always be trying to fill
Come on.
the missing piece.
Yes. Yes.
You were created by God. You were there before you were here.
Amen. Come on.
Come on.
So that longing you feel, and you snort a line to get rid of it,
Come on. Go
or
ahead.
you take another shot to get rid of it, or you go out clubbing to get rid of it, or you have sex to get rid of it. It's never going to end. And that's why you see so many people die in their sin, because they just can't get enough heroin. They just can't get enough sex. They just can't get enough pornography. They can't get enough to fill it, because nothing fills it except Jesus Christ. Nothing fills it. There is no condemnation for those who were in Christ Jesus.
Yes.
So there is no reason for you to not come back to him,
Yes.
or come to him if it's the first time.
Yes.
God brought his son back from the dead. He's still bringing back people from the dead.
Yes.
Wow.
From all manner of death. All manner. He'll do it for you. He'll do it for your child. He'll do it for your mother. He'll do it for your father. There is no lost cause. None. None. And if you're praying for what you feel like is a lost cause, press on.
Yes.
Keep pressing. Keep praying. The prayers of a righteous man availeth
Yes.
much.
Yes.
The word says, I have been young and I have been old, but I have never seen God's children forsaken.
Yes.
Never. We don't have to beg. He wants to do it.
Yes.
He wants to change your life. Tonight, I just pray for the revelation of who you are. And I pray tonight that God shows you what you look like to him, because that will change your life forever.
Yes.
When you see yourself the way God sees you, it causes you to fall in love with him. It causes you to repent. It is the goodness of God that draws people to repentance. So tonight, I'm praying he pours out his glory and shows you his goodness.
Yes, Lord. Yes.
Sometimes I feel bad that I waited so long. But God also says he'll restore that which was lost.
Yes.
Carl can tell you, they said I'd never speak again. When I woke up, I couldn't talk. And what words I could get out, I couldn't talk because this side of my face was paralyzed from where all the tubes had been laying inside. Said she's not going to sing. She's going to need therapy, speech therapy, to learn to talk again. And Carl can tell you, I had done swallow studies. If you guys have never done that, it's really nasty. They give you like a metal flavored marshmallow and you have to try to swallow it while they do the scan. So I kept having to do those, and I kept failing them and failing them. They wouldn't take my feeding tube out until I passed it because they couldn't send me home with they didn't want to send me home with a feeding tube.
All this while she still thought that she had been in a car accident.
Yeah.
So, it was the last day that you were in the hospital. I had asked her every day, do you know why you're here? She'd say some random answer that was not the right answer. Yeah, the night, it was a Sunday night at 6 o'clock. I'll tell you how I know that. Because I helped her up out of the bed. She had passed her swallow study that day. So the feeding tube was out. So she was able to get up and go to the bathroom.
But I still couldn't walk, so he had to help me. And I had to just move from the bed onto the porta potty. And I got news for you ladies, if you want to kill the romance, there's nothing like having your husband watch you go to the bathroom. But you know what? That's another testament to the love of God that's in this man. When he said for better or worse, he meant it. Because he had every intention of staying with me, even though he knew that that's what the rest of our marriage might look like.
Yeah.
I knew that the blood of Jesus spoke a better word.
Yeah.
Because
Come on.
I helped her into the bathroom. It was 6:03 on a Sunday night, and she was sitting on the toilet, and I said, baby, do you know why you're in the hospital? And she looked up at me. No, it was 6 because they had 6 o'clock service. She said, I had pneumonia. And she said it without the side of her face being paralyzed. I said, wait a minute, what's going on? Are you punking me or something? She said, no, I'm healed. She said, I feel fine. I feel different. She recalled everything that had happened, recalled not the pain, but she knew why she was in the hospital. She knew she had been in a coma for that period of time.
Yes.
She knew that her face was paralyzed, and now it wasn't. We found out later that night that her friend, at that exact moment in time, walked into the church, went immediately to the altar to the front, and everybody gathered around and interceded for Bethany. And God healed her and restored her like that.
God is
They
good,
said she
y'all.
wasn't going to sing again 3 months. Was it months or weeks?
No, they said I would be in therapy for 3 months, and I walked out of the hospital 3 days later.
Yep.
Never.
A month later, she was on stage singing for Adam Crab.
We opened for Adam Crab 4 days later, or 4 weeks later, and it was on April Fool's Day.
Yeah.
So the devil got punked, actually.
We take it personal. We get really mad when people start saying that God doesn't heal anymore. We get really mad when people say that God doesn't do that kind of thing. That was for the Old Testament
Come
church.
on.
No. God heals just as much today as He ever did. He is the same yesterday and today and forever.
And he said, these things I do, you will do, but greater.
Yes.
So we have that hope, guys. If there's anyone that thinks they're ready to come back to the Lord, if there's anyone that just needs prayer, if you need healing, I know the man that can do it.
Yeah.